Pew Bibles. It'd be John 18, 28 through 40. Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters, so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom does not belong to this world. If my kingdom belonged to this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" And after he had said this, he went over to the Jews again and told them, "I find no case against him, but you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews?" They shouted in reply, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a rebel. Keith will now give the message.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good to be with you here this morning, coming to you from 5494 Elm Street in Lowville, New York, one of the spare rooms of our house, where, believe it or not, we have snow on the ground again. We're under a winter weather advisory, so I hope you folks are enjoying spring break out there. Our spring break is not for another week yet, or not until the week after Easter. So once again, we're behind the times, but it's good to be with you. It's good to be coming to you in this way. This isn't ideal, really. I wish I could see you all. Wish we could be there and enjoy your presence. But I appreciate this opportunity to share with you on this particular Sunday morning. Just as an update on what's going on with us, the oncologist that we have is recommending another 3 months of chemo treatments, which I guess is somewhat good news in that the treatments seem to be working, and so they want to continue doing that. Unfortunately, what that means is it's going to be a little bit until we are able to make a long-term decision about our time in Iowa. However, we do hope to visit for a week or two at a time like we've been doing, but as far as a permanent setup for the future, it's probably going to be fall till that happens at the earliest, if it happens then. And once again, I don't know. But we appreciate your accommodation and your caring for us, the patience of the congregation. It's been truly remarkable. So thank you. Thanks to all of you. And we will continue with these treatments as they go. And hopefully it won't be too long until we get to see you again. I will say this about these movie recordings. Those of you who play the over-under, maybe this is a chance for you to get in with either Justin or Katie, because they know exactly how long this video is. So just a thought, in case you want some insider information, that's a possibility. The title of this sermon this morning is Cognitive Dissonance. That's a topic that I actually addressed in one of my Caring Bridge writings. It's the existence of two conflicting ideas in your head, and at some point you need to choose between one or the other, and it causes some discomfort. And in my case, the cognitive dissonance is all the things that I want to do in the future, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to. And so I have these two ideas that are butting heads inside my own head. Dissonance is a theme of the Lenten season this year, and this particular passage that was read is a conversation between Jesus and Pilate, and it shows the dissonance that is going on between those two. Now, as you were listening to this being read, did you get the feeling this conversation wasn't going anywhere? That they weren't really connecting with each other? Submission versus power is the theme for this morning. Jesus is talking about submission to a heavenly kingdom. Pilate is approaching the agenda from the position of worldly power. And because of that, they're talking past each other. And this particular conversation just does not seem to get anywhere. Pilate had been given charge of that particular part of the Jewish community by the Roman government. And as long as he kept order and people paid their taxes, he could keep his job. So approaching from a position of power is the only thing he understood. And so when Jesus is talking about submission in a heavenly kingdom, it seems to go right past Pilate, and he doesn't seem to understand it. You know, that's a little bit of a mark of our culture today as we think about power versus submission. Just last weekend, my brothers and I went to a hockey game in Buffalo, New York, the Buffalo Sabres versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. Those two teams were tied for first place. So whoever won that game was going to be in sole possession of first place. It was a big game. And both of those teams had the goal of asserting their power over each other. They wanted to intimidate the other team. And we were barely 5 minutes into the game, and there was a big fight involving all kinds of players. The penalty box got so full that there wasn't even room for everyone to sit there. Trying to intimidate, trying to dominate. Submission was not a word for that time. At the beginning of the second period, only 2 seconds went by until the fight started. And then they got that one cleaned up, and another 4 seconds went by, and another fight started. And it was like that all night. It was entertaining. It was fun to watch. But it was interesting to see how hard each team was trying to dominate the other. We get into these situations in our world sometimes, and the Anabaptist teachings of peace and pacifism can cause some cognitive dissonance in our head. Does that really work? Is what Jesus is talking about here with Pilate, is that how we should be? Is it practical for the world today? You know, I'm remembering the story of Rick Warren that I told several weeks ago. In fact, I think it was in a sermon when I was out at Sugar Creek. So if this is a repeat for some of you, bear with me. But Rick Warren is a successful evangelist that was concerned about some of the ideas of Christian nationalism that he was seeing. And he confronted that by making some quotes from Jesus as to why this was maybe not the best way to go. The proponents of Christian nationalism that heard Rick Warren speak asked him, "Where are you getting this material that you're saying?" And Rick Warren said, "Well, it comes from the words of Jesus in the New Testament." The response he got was twofold. First of all, some people said, "Oh, okay, if that's the words of Jesus, maybe we should re-examine what we're thinking and what we're hearing." However, just as often, people said, "Those words of Jesus were good for the first century. They do not work today. They are not practical in the world we're living in today." And that is the cognitive dissonance that is in my head. Is that really true? Is that how it is? Are these words of Jesus just pie in the sky that are not going to work? Did you feel any satisfaction when the United States bombed Iran and took out one of the supreme leaders of that country, I felt a little bit. I thought, this is a good thing. It's good to get this person off the board. How about Osama bin Laden when he was killed by U.S. forces back in the day? Did you feel any satisfaction about that? I admit that I did. That cognitive dissonance in my head about military action versus the practical approach, once again, was working itself forward. That was an interesting day for us, by the way, September 11th, 2001, when the Twin Towers were attacked. We had just moved from Washington, Iowa to Akron, New York to assume a pastorate of a church there, but we hadn't interviewed with the conference leadership yet. So we set up an interview date in Auburn, New York on September 11th, 2001. We were traveling there. We did not have the radio on, and I remember going through the toll booth. It was a manual toll booth at the time, and the people there taking the tolls were talking about something terrible that had happened. I didn't quite get it, but I could tell that their attention was elsewhere. We got to the meeting, and the folks from conference asked if we'd had our radio on. Well, no, we hadn't. We were just driving. And so they filled us in about these attacks on the Twin Towers, and it was shocking, and it was tough news to hear. That was a fascinating time for us because 1 week later, on a Sunday afternoon, we had worship service at our church in the morning. We had a community service and gathering in the afternoon for all the churches of the Akron community in the park to commemorate and pray about the situation that was happening. There was a lot of patriotism there, a lot of flag waving, a lot of folks from our Mennonite congregation were a part of that, waving a flag as well. And then in the evening, it was my installation service at the church. So that was kind of an unforgettable day and kind of a strange one. But that's the way that it went. You know, as I think about this cognitive dissonance and about the idea whether the way of peace and pacifism is really the way to go, I think of Mike, who is a attendee at Lowell Mennonite Church. Mike came to church because his wife came to church. Is there anybody like that at Sugar Creek that comes to church only because your wife does? You don't have to answer that right now. But Mike was an Iraqi war veteran. He had fought there. And he actually was suffering from a case of PTSD. He needed to be sitting on the outside of the bench very close to the door in church, or he was not comfortable. One day, there was a presentation in church, a young man who was very locked into this way of peace, and pacifism is the way to go. And he was very forceful in his approach and his presentation of it, and it upset Mike, who was a soldier from the war. So Mike wanted to talk to me about that. Mike and I sat on the porch outside of our house, and Mike said, since that has happened on a Sunday morning, I've come to the conclusion that this is a tradition of the Mennonite Church, and it's what you all have believed, and I'm not going to challenge that. I'm going to be at home with that from now on, but I do believe that it's a little bit of a naive way of looking at things, and realistically, I don't think the world can function that way. What do you think about that? How do you feel about that? Have you ever thought that way? Occasionally, I think that way. David Lowe's is a Lutheran minister who, because he's Lutheran, believes that there is a place in our world for police forces and military, and that we do need to quell evil in the world at times. However, when David Lowe's was writing about this particular passage that we are talking about this morning, the conversation between Jesus and Pilate, he said that he thinks that there is a strong case to be made that peace and pacifism is the way to go. And in fact, he mentions the Mennonites and the Quakers and the Church of the Brethren, and that maybe we could listen to them as to how to approach the world and how to move forward. You know, if it doesn't seem realistic that peace and pacifism is the way to go and that submission is the way to go, We're going to find out here in 3 weeks. This is Lenten service number 4. 5 and 6 happen in the next couple of weeks. And then Lenten service number 7. We are going to celebrate the triumph of Jesus rising from the grave and conquering death. And suddenly this way of submission is going to take a reality of victory that we didn't foresee coming. Nobody foresaw it. So here we are, working our way to this wonderful resurrection time, and maybe, just maybe, what Jesus is talking about with Pilate is indeed the way to go. You know, there's so much dissonance in the world today. We tend to get locked into our own ideas. Just this weekend, I'm going to be visiting a race car show down in Syracuse, New York. One of the drivers there is going to be displaying his car, but he's having trouble getting parts for the car. And the reason he's having trouble is the person who sells him race car parts is not going to sell it to him anymore because of their differing political views. They've gotten in a big political argument. That's what I think is a bit of a tragedy, when dissonance takes over our lives like that and we yield to it. And instead of confronting dissonance for what it is, we end up yielding to one side or the other, and we simply accelerate our differences and we don't get along. So what's the answer to this idea that peace and pacifism is the way to go, even though it doesn't seem very practical? I don't have an answer this morning, but I do have a suggestion that maybe would lead to something down the road for us here at Sugar Creek. First of all, the resurrection as it happened back in the first century triggered an unbelievable growth pattern between the churches there, churches that were formed after the Holy Spirit came on the people at Pentecost, and the power of heaven came down and manifested itself amongst the people in an incredible way, and it changed that entire society. Now, as I think about our role at Sugar Creek today, changing our entire society doesn't seem like a possibility. There's many more people, there are many denominations, there are many churches. What should our role be at Sugar Creek? I suggest that within these 4 walls at Sugar Creek Mennonite Church, that we find a way to put aside our cognitive dissonance, and that we find a way to share with each other, and that we find a way to respect each other even when we have differing views. And I know that we do. And I know that some of you struggle with peace and pacifism in the same way that I do. So let's talk about that. Let's consider that, and let's respect each other's opinions, and let's learn how to get along together. And we have learned how to get along together, I think. I think you've done a remarkable job at Sugar Creek. And then eventually, perhaps, that harmony that we're feeling amongst each other can go outside these 4 walls, and we can get some influence in the community. And other people might look at us at Sugar Creek as something that is attractive and a way to go. I think that has already happened. And I'd be curious how many of you that are here this morning have a story that you could tell about what this church has done for you and how much it has changed your life. So as we attempt to live the way of Christ in the world, we start with the church, we move outside to the community, and we widen the circle as much as we can to include everyone and our witness that this way of peace and pacifism is the way to go. It's a tough thing to consider. It's one that I am still working on, despite the fact that I have understood it for years. I do have a story to tell about this. After September 11th, 2001, about a week later, I had decided this peace and pacifism isn't working. I'm going to abandon that, and I'm going to change my paradigm of faith. I still remember where I was when that happened. I was in a pizza and chicken wing shop in Akron, New York, which that's one of the major food groups in Buffalo, New York. They make them better there than anyone else does. The TV was on in the corner. They were showing the cleanup in New York City. There were posters inside the building asking for help for fire personnel and law enforcement personnel to travel to New York to give a hand there. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to do this peace and pacifism thing anymore. I changed my mind again later. It's too ingrained in me to just abandon. Plus, it's kind of hard to ignore the words of Jesus. It's kind of what that book said. What if Jesus was serious about the church? There we go. It's a challenge. But it's a challenge I believe that we're up for and that I believe we can exercise at a small level, and then hopefully that will spread around into the community. Thank you for allowing me to share here this morning. It's been a blessing. We do hope to visit in Iowa sometime soon. We're working on that right now. Treatments are going well. Thank you all for your prayers and for your caring. And I wish you the best and God's blessing as you attempt to put Jesus' teachings into practice. This is WZHR-TV signing off on another Sunday morning.
Our responding hymn, I invite you to turn to 324 in your blue worship book, Seek Ye First the Kingdom of God.
Seek ye first the kingdom of God